What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is, because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, you know, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development programme I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews, and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so, into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer, or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. One of the things I love about doing ScaleUp Radio is the variety, the variety of guests that we have on, the variety of interests, and the variety of the businesses that they look after. And this is absolutely no exception. Today, I talk with Alan Owen, who is the founder of LABRATS. And this is all about a campaign for raising awareness around nuclear testing and the effects on families and communities as a result of that. And he set it up as a community interest company. So it's around the business aspects of it, but it's a great example of how the power of a story and telling that story in the right way can get us to where we want to get to. And I think that's a lesson that we can take across our businesses, whatever it is that we're trying to do, is that power of the story. So we cover all sorts of subjects and tips and hints around it. You'll hear about a campaign that Alan managed to run that made a big difference, but how he's managed to leverage contacts to get in to talk to the right people that he wants to talk to, and his strategies and tactics around that. So it is an absolutely fascinating story, and one that I know that you're going to want to listen to. Oh, and I nearly forgot to mention that Alan suffered a major health scare only last year, and we talk about how that's changed his perspective on life as well. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here with Alan Owen, who is the founder of LABRATS. So, Alan, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, LABRATS sounds intriguing. Tell us what that's all about.
Well, LABRATS stands for Legacy of the Atomic Bomb, Recognition for Atomic Test Survivors. And we are a small CIC in the UK who are ambitious to get recognition and education and awareness around the nuclear testing programs around the world. My link to it is that I am a descendant of a nuclear test veteran. So my father was on Christmas Island in the Pacific, not to be confused with the one in the Indian Ocean. There are two.
Okay.
On 1962 for an operation called Operation Dominic, which was a joint UK-US nuclear testing, which he saw 24 nuclear detonations in 78 days.
Gosh.
So I obviously heard his stories, and we were doing research around as a family. Unfortunately, we lost him quite young. So he was only 52 when he went. And we decided that there was no recognition in the UK for nuclear test veterans.
Mm-hmm.
They were the only nuclear superpower that were not recognizing their test veterans. The US had done it, even Fiji had done it.
Oh, right.
So we also found that there was a lack of education. So I could ask you the question as to whether you were taught nuclear testing in schools when you were at school.
Taught in what way? Taught that it went on?
Yes.
Not in school, I don't think. There are a little bit of discussion around that sort of thing because I was in the Air Force for a little bit, so there were some discussions around it then, but not at school, I don't think.
So what we found is that the Cold War is taught, World War II and Cold War, but the nuclear testing part has almost been hidden, and a lot of the veterans felt that they were being airbrushed from history. So what we decided to do was set up LABRATS. I was chairman of another organisation, a charity, the British Nuclear Test Veterans Association, for 4 years. And as a charity, they helped the veterans. So we felt that as a CIC, we could do a lot more around campaigning.
Okay.
And in 2020, I spoke to a lady called Susie Boniface, who's from the Daily Mirror. And together we created what we called the Look Me in the Eye campaign, which started in 2021, which was our big push to get nuclear testing and the problems and the struggles back into the arena.
Okay.
And get it back into the public eye and the public domain. The idea being that schools and colleges would then get it.
Yep.
And that they would then be allowed to get it onto the curriculum, even if it was for a small part. So our aim in the initial thing was to get recognition for the veterans and to then engage with the UK government on their education programme and their awareness raising, which we did.
Yep.
And the Look Me in the Eye programme, as it was called, the campaign, proved to be very successful. Within 18 months, we had a medal awarded to the nuclear veterans by Rishi Sunak at a commemorative event on November the 21st last year. And that was a long campaign. We met with Keir Starmer, we met with Boris Johnson, we did a lot of political campaigning. Mm-hmm. We did a march on London to raise awareness of these people. Obviously, a lot of them are 75 to 85 years old.
Yeah, right.
So our organisation started up because the people involved, the other directors with me, one of them's a descendant, and the other one is a nuclear veteran himself.
Okay.
My wife's involved as well. She does a lot of the shop and admin and stuff of the business, but it's a collective effort because we're all connected.
Okay, so real driving passion and purpose behind the business, clearly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And tell me, what you mentioned the fact that you closed down the charity and set it up as a community interest company. What were some of the reasons, and why did you feel that you could do more campaigning as a CIC?
Yeah, the charity actually stayed running. I just left, so the charity still runs. There were a lot of restrictions put on from the Charity Commission about exactly how much political campaigning you could do.
Right.
And as a CIC, there's still restrictions, but there was a lot more scope that we could do by joining with the Daily Mirror and joining and having this joint campaign. And we felt that as a CIC, we could use the funds that we were getting from the help with the Daily Mirror and other people's memberships and subscriptions, and we could use it for a specific purpose. With the charity side, obviously, there's lots of red tape, there's lots of legislation you have to go through being a charity. And as a CIC, that's a lot less, but we felt that we could really target what we wanted to do in our plan, which was our ERA program, which was the education, recognition and awareness. Yep. So we've ticked off the R, which is great. And now we're moving on to the education and awareness side. So we didn't think that it would be so successful so quickly. And to get a medal after only 18 months when people have been trying since 1983 to get this sort of awareness was quite a big thing for us. but we saw ourselves as really the end of a relay race, we called it, that people had started this off years ago. They're no longer here, and we just finished it off. We really made it happen at the end. But there have been lots of people who had done lots of years of campaigning in order to get to there. It's just that the Look Me in the Eye was a completely different idea.
Right. And so what was the core of that campaign, do you think, that made it so successful?
One of the things that we tried to do in the past, a lot of the campaigns had been around lobbying the government, and you should give them this. And there was lots of things about truth and justice and lots of you're covering it up. We stayed away from that to begin with and went to just listen to them. We went to see Keir Starmer with a veteran and a descendant and myself and Susie Boniface from the Daily Mirror, and just said, will you listen to him? Because he's been campaigning for 60 years, a guy called John Morris, and nobody's listened to him at this level. So can you just look him in the eye and say he's not worthy? And that changed the whole focus of it and getting it up to that level of, leader of the opposition, which was fantastic.
Yep.
And then Boris Johnson met us, and he met the same people. So we tried to make it consistent that the same people went. So Boris Johnson met John Morris, and John Morris actually said to him at the end of the meeting, look, you can either choose to recognise me and my colleagues, or you can actually tell me to sod off. And he sat opposite them. You can see the picture of him. He sat opposite him, and that's what he tells him. And there was like an intake of breath almost from lots of the people around the senior civil servants, like, you've just told the Prime Minister you can sod off. And
I should think Boris loved that, actually.
But what it did was it actually spurred him on. He said, right, I'm going to do something about this. I've actually sat and listened to you, and I think that there is something in this. And yes, you do need recognition. And it was that moment of him and seeing him and listening to him, whereas before he'd only ever read a report for 10 minutes, maybe max, and given instructions, whereas he actually took the time to sit and listen. And that was what the whole campaign was like, was just give us an hour, half an hour, an hour of your time and actually listen to us.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more people did that in lots of other sectors, and actually just sit and listen to the people and listen to what they have to say and give them the time, that a lot more things would get done.
Yes.
An awful lot more stuff would get done.
Yeah, and it's sort of the way of the modern world a bit, isn't it? We're all anxious to tell others our point of view rather than to listen first. And there's a big lesson in there, isn't there?
And what that meant was that Boris actually kicked off the medal award and got them to relook at it. And then he actually also put in place, we asked him for some funding for education and some oral histories, because the veterans are of an age where unfortunately they are dying.
Yeah.
We're talking, atomic testing back starting in 52. So they are the lucky ones that are left are unfortunately in their 80s, some in their 90s.
Yeah.
So there's an oral history program there to get their voices and get their story on tape, like we're doing now, so that people can listen to them. Yeah. So he actually came through on all of the points. And I know Boris is a bit Marmite. Some people like him, some people hate him. But for us, he actually came through on all of the points.
Excellent. Very good.
And I think it was, again, because they listened to it.
Yeah. And what's the scale? How many veterans or how many people have been impacted by that testing program?
Well, there were approximately 22,000 servicemen who went to the testing program. If you include the Commonwealth people, because there were New Zealanders, Australians, and include the civilians that went as well, a lot of civilian contractors.
Yeah,
the figure is nearer 100,000 people.
Yeah.
And so take into fact the impacted communities as well, the Aboriginal people of Australia and the Gilbertese on Christmas Island. It's hundreds of thousands of people that have been impacted by it. And generations like myself, my father died very young. There's been lots of studies that have gone on. There's lots of psychological issues around, was it connected to the test? Was it not connected to the test? And there's lots of people with lots of health problems. And this constant thing still runs today. So we think that there's about 250,000, maybe 300,000 descendants in the UK and the Commonwealth area that are potentially affected by what their father's service was. And because of the Official Secrets Act and what they signed at the time, a lot of them don't even know that their fathers or grandfathers actually participated. They came back and didn't talk about it. Yeah, it was national service. They went to an island for a year, saw some nuclear bombs. They set off quite a few majorly large bombs. And much, much bigger than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But they did it as a national service, and they came back and went on to other careers. Some stayed in the forces, others went on to other careers. And it's not until they pass that they then go back in history and look, there's a folder here, pictures. Really? Was he at Christmas Island? Was he at the test? Was he? They then become interested and then look us up and go, I didn't realize there was such a community behind it. Right. So we've been told that we're a niche community.
Okay.
Because we are, and we are a niche community, but it's ever-growing community, and we want to make sure that more people are aware of what happened, because it connects all of the subjects. I've spoken to the Welsh Education Board, and he actually told me that he was embarrassed because he didn't know anything about it, but when he looked it up, he said it covers history, science, geography, politics. There's this whole subject that they're not even touching, that they could touch across the board in a curriculum. It's not just politically wise or anything else. It could do with the whole thing, science, and to do with how it got developed and how we developed it and what we did and the whole history program as to why we did it. There's so much that can be done, and that's what we want to try and do is to raise the awareness now.
Yeah. So what will how will you know when your job is done?
Our goal is to get it taught in schools and part of the curriculum.
Right. And
we've achieved a minor step with that in Wales, where I am. And it's been added to the Welsh Baccalaureate as an option for the students to look at topics, and it's now a topic that they can choose and go off to research themselves.
Great.
So that is our goal, is to get as many people aware of the testing program. And we've created an academy, a thing called the LABRATS Academy, which is online, where teachers can go and they can look at lessons about the testing program all around the world, because it's not just Britain that tested. Obviously, there are other countries that tested. And there are quizzes and interactive videos where they can teach their students all about it.
Yeah.
And look at the political side as well as exactly what happened. And then there's handout sheets for quizzes to fill in. And it's all interactive and it's all online. So that it's there forever and it's not forgotten. And the operations that people are talking about, Operation Grapple, for instance, we did some work with Call the Midwife, for instance, and that was in one of the episodes that one of the parents, their child was born deformed and unfortunately died, and he was part of Operation Grapple on Christmas Island. So that brought the word grapple to millions.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do, is bring an educational resource and bring awareness to the world. And we've linked up with other organizations around the world. We have a directory on a site called Nuclear Voices, where there are 70 frontline communities, such as ours, that are all together. So if people are researching Marshallese and the American testing, they can go and look who's looking them up. If they're looking at uranium miners or downwinders in Nevada, all these sorts of things that are connected to the testing program, they can go and look them up and go and do their own research. So it's about connecting all the dots together and presenting it in a package so that they're never forgotten. That's really what we're attempting to do.
So they're never forgotten, and presumably so that we learn lessons from it, I imagine.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's lots of them. The veterans that don't want them ever to be designated again don't want them. There's others that will say, well, I didn't do this for nothing, so there is a deterrent. Right. And there's two sides to that opinion. And we're a member of ICANN, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. If you sit and talk to these veterans, and we played a countdown from 10. You get the bombs coming. One guy actually said, "I can't sit and listen to this. I'm really sorry. It affects me now.
Right.
I can't. I have to go outside." So, there's still that impact that it had on them, even though it was for a year or 18 months they were out there. It still has that impact on them, 60, 70 years later.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So, what's the business model? How do you? There must be funding required to do all the campaigning that you're doing and collect all the resources, put them all together. So how does the business model work for you?
So we have 4 directors, and we have a membership scheme. So the veterans and the descendants can join as members. We produce a quarterly magazine called Atom. It runs from January to December, so we have 4 editions a year, where we give them updates as to what's going on, what's happening with the campaign, pictures. And we also run a thing called the All Tests Reunion, which is held in September every year at Pontins in Sandbay,
right,
where 100 veterans get together for a week's activities of just telling stories, having a laugh, having a drink. We provide entertainment. And we get traditional dancers back from Christmas Island, or Kiribati, as it's called now, and they provide traditional dances for them. And we try and encourage this befriending and this group community. So that has been funded over the last couple of years by some great people, the Veterans Foundation, the Armed Forces Covenant Trust, National Lottery. So we try to get funding for specific projects. We use our membership income to do the day-to-day stuff, the Atom magazine, the insurance, all the day-to-day running costs that we have.
Yep. That's from the memberships primarily, the running costs.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So then we look at specific projects. So for the Look Me in the Eye campaign, we looked to specific funders for that. So we got some sponsors for that. We ran a seminar last year in February, and ICANN sponsored us for that one. So we tend to work on a project-by-project basis. And for this education project, as part of the Look Me in the Eye campaign, we asked for a funding round for education, and that's just been opened, actually only opened a couple of days ago.
Okay.
And it's just been open for applications, so we're going to apply for that, for an education round, to get some educational material out there. We do rely on our community to help. Lots of people who are interested. I would say that 95% of our subscribers have some form of connection to it. So it was either a father or grandfather, or they've married into the family. It's some connection there. The rest are people who are interested, people who are researching. We have a lot from the academic side,
okay,
who are researching, plus the medical side as well as people who are doing plays and are doing other educational stuff on this topic. So there's a play called 1,000 Suns by a guy called Jamie Sefton, who has created this play around one of the veteran stories, which is fantastic. And, he's a subscriber to us and we help him. So there's this very sense of community involvement.
Very good. And what tips would what lessons have you picked up on the way about maybe sourcing funding, for example?
One of the things we struggled with a lot at the start is being a new startup. Lots of the funds that we were going for we need a year's accounts. We need, you need to be established. You need to have the accounts published at Companies House. You need to have 4 directors, 3 of which are not connected to each other at all, not married to each other. All of these things that we found out later as we were applying for grants. When I was chairman of the charity, the charity had been around since, for 10 years at that point. And it was easier to say, we're a registered charity, and off it went. So when we went for CIC funding, it was a lot more difficult, and a lot more organizations don't give to CIC. It's still, you have to be a registered charity. So in our world, it was a little bit more difficult to get that initial funding. But now we've been established, it'll be 3 years that we were funded in September. That's changed a lot. People are like, I can look you up on Companies House and I can look at your accounts. We're just about to file another set. So now you've got 2 years worth. So what we had to make sure was that we had enough funding at the start to be able to run this organization for at least a couple of years.
Yeah.
And build the membership, because it obviously had to build, without any grant funding. So we made sure that we had enough money before we started to make sure that we would have 2 years worth of operating costs in order to run.
And how did you go about getting that funding?
We went to other companies. So I'm from an IT background. That's my background. So we went to other IT companies and companies that I've used in the past and spoke to them about the subject. We went to the Daily Mirror, who have been campaigning for 20 plus years on this. And with Susie Boniface, and before then with Mr. Stott, who was done it from 1983. So they had a connection to it. So we tried to pick people that had connections to it. We also went out to massive organizations that had connections to the nuclear tests. So the plane companies, the people that make nuclear weapons, all these people, and asked them whether they would support us. And a lot of them did. And as a start going to them, that can be quite scary, going to them and asking when you're asking massive organizations with millions and millions of pounds worth of budgets, asking them for a small amount of funding to go. But they've actually been very receptive to us.
And just on the practicalities of that, because, you know, I'm sure there's people listening running their own businesses and thinking, you know, who do I talk to in some of these big companies? So where do you start if you want to talk to the head of a major international company, global company, or whatever? Where do you start?
What we did was we did some research on the companies, but then we also used a lot of our political connections.
Okay.
So where we have connections with MPs and connections with Secretary of State for Defence, shadow secretaries, all these sorts of people in higher positions, to ask them. So they were on board. The Labour Party were on board with us instantly. Keir Starmer actually said to us, your campaign is our campaign. Anything we can do to help,
right.
which then opened the doors for lots of other things. So once we got into there, but we only got into there because there was help from the Daily Mirror and Susie Boniface and other people like Sir John Hayes, who was patron of the charity that knew people. So it was around about making all of those connections and then making them work. And that can be quite difficult, and it can be quite frustrating, and playing the game almost of getting a kickback, from an MP that says, you're not my constituent, I can't do anything about it, get a constituent. But then we were quite lucky because we would put that out to our members and go, is anybody a constituent in this area? And they'd go, yes, I'm a constituent, I'll write in.
Yeah.
So you're almost constantly playing this game of chess around who to contact and who to get, as well as doing obviously your own research around who's on the board, who's not on the board, who's connected to it. Is there if it's an American company, for instance, do we have an American contact? Do we have a senator that's friendly to an American version of us as the Atomic Veterans? And working with people, there were a lot of meetings and a lot of hard work. A lot of it, unfortunately, because of the time zone differences, at strange times as well. So, 1 o'clock meetings and 2 o'clock in the morning meetings when you talk to people in America, they go, well, I'll meet you at 4 o'clock. And they go, right, well, you're 7 hours ahead or 7 hours behind. So there was a lot of that and making sure that we built the connections. I was quite lucky because I'd been in the sort of nuclear test veteran arena for 7 years before that. So my name was already out there with some people who'd already made connections. So we built on those connections as well. It would have been a lot more difficult, I think, if we'd have just appeared without having that bit of background.
And are you the only organisation of its type?
There are 2 other charities that help, but we're the only CIC. There are 2 other charities. The one that I was chairman of is still there, the Nuclear Test Veterans Association, the British Nuclear Test Veterans Association. And there is another charity called the NCCF, which is a Nuclear Community Charity Fund, which helps people with house adaptations and issues. So if you've got a test veteran or a family member that needs a wheelchair or needs mobility or needs help, they help with that, and they're brilliant at it. As to what they do, you can apply and then get grants, and that came from the libel funds from the government. So that's sitting there as well. So as a nuclear community in Britain, we're actually quite well served because we do the campaigning and we were called the flag wavers and the people that gets in people's faces and do the campaigns, and they're helping on a financial side. and then the BNTVA was sat doing welfare and other things. So it was quite a good tie-in.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So, what sort of things would you point to that you said, that you'd say we got that right? That made the difference. I think you mentioned one or two already, but what sort of things would you tease out and say, yep, that was a major thing?
Yeah, the major thing was partnering with the Daily Mirror, who had already been campaigning beforehand.
Yeah,
that was a major step. But to use them with us for their exposure. Susie Boniface is our lead with them, and she is on the press review in Sky. She is on the Jeremy Vine show. She gave us a complete outlet for what we wanted to do. So when there was anything that we needed to get out there, like meeting with Keir Starmer or whatever, she would even throw it in. Even when it wasn't really a subject, she'd try and get it in so that it could be raised awareness. So that was a big thing for us to get that. And then the real thing that opened the door for us was the meeting with Keir Starmer, for him to agree. Yeah. And that was done with a lot of hard work around with John Healey and Rebecca Long-Bailey and these sort of MPs to get to Keir Starmer. And I have to say that he was fantastic. Because what he did was, when he said your campaign is our campaign and opened up, whatever you need, just tell me. And if we can help, we will. That suddenly opened up massive avenues for us because we could almost play him against Boris Johnson and say, okay, he's met us now, Boris, you haven't. Why haven't you met us?
Yeah. And was it, as you said earlier, just really down to that was it John, did you say, getting him in front of him and sharing the story, that looking at Leon, look me in the eyes, that was that really got Keir Starmer on board, do you think?
Yes, definitely. I could put you in a room for half an hour with John. Whenever he makes presentations, we did one at the Labour Party conference, we did a fringe event at the Labour Party conference. Within 10 minutes of him talking, everybody's crying. Because his story is so powerful, and his story is it's very upsetting, and unfortunately he lost a son very young, but the way he tells it and the passion that he has for it, and his 60-year battle to get recognition, you can't help but get involved and get in, and it's that side that really we did really well. Yeah. Was getting them involved and getting their stories out there. And at our seminar last year, we had nuclear test veterans, we had the wives and widows who normally don't get a voice, and we had the descendants all on the stage. And we did the veterans last, and Susie was the chair for that meeting, and she asked them all at the thing, how many of you, I think there were 7 of them on the stage, and she said, how many of you have had cancer? And all 7 put their hands up. And then she said, how many of you have lost a child? And 6 of them put their hand up. And it was just so powerful. Yeah, that you could give that to anybody, and that's what we did right. I think is getting the story to the people.
Yeah,
that was really key for us.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. And what would you change? If you were to go back again, what would you say? Maybe we didn't quite get that right, or we do differently.
I think one of the areas that we would like to do more with, and we're trying to address this now, is on the education front. I thought it would be a lot easier to get things on the curriculum,
right?
Because it's a topic that's not been taught for generations. So let's get it on the curriculum. There's lots of material out there, and that is actually quite difficult to get a subject onto the curriculum, and it's a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be without the material itself being there. So you go, I'd like this topic. Can you help us generate this educational material? And they go, well, where's the educational material?
Yeah.
I'll get on to the topic. And I made a big mistake. I live in Wales now. I pitched our academy to the Welsh Education Board. And I did a big presentation for them. Here's the academy. We love it. It's brilliant. It's got everything that we needed, but you're missing something. And I was like, oh, great. What am I missing?
Not in Welsh.
Exactly that. He said, you need to translate it all into Welsh.
Yeah.
And I hadn't, it just hadn't twigged me that they would need a Welsh version of it. So we had to translate every single video that we'd done into Welsh. We then had to make sure that all the subtitles were in Welsh, all the quizzes were in Welsh, all the extra material was in Welsh. So that is something that we got wrong at the start.
Yeah.
That we need, and we are learning about that. I'm not from an educational world background, so I could do all the IT bits and create everything else, but it was that side that we really needed. And that's now turned around with this, hopefully with this grant from the government, that we'll be getting this educational material and getting the message out there, and really partnering with other people that have created educational material on other subjects to make sure that we get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, good. And from it sounds like are you involved full time? Is this full time what you do?
We actually I volunteer.
Okay, so you don't draw a salary or an income from...
No, not at all. I do it for a passion.
Wow.
For it. And I had an IT company, so I ran an IT company before. So this is more of a part-time volunteer role, and the others are volunteers as well. So we have low overheads in terms of wages and everything else. They volunteer because they've got this connection. There is this major connection. Unfortunately, I had some health issues last year, so it meant that I had to give up work. So I've actually got more time to do this now. So
I saw a post. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe you had a cardiac arrest, didn't you?
I did. Yes, the 3rd of April last year, I had a cardiac arrest playing walking football.
Wow.
Being over 50 and playing some walking football to exercise. I was playing at Caldecott Leisure Centre, and I played the first game. It was a 6-a-side game. I played the first game. We were watching our other team, and unfortunately, I collapsed on the floor. Luckily, I was near an ex-police officer who tipped me over, and then we had a military guy called Sean who administered CPR to me. And Caldecott Leisure Centre had a defib, so the defib came out, and they gave me 3 shocks of a defib to bring me back. Then an air ambulance landed and realised I wasn't very well, so they had to have a doctor come. So they landed another air ambulance. So I had 2 air ambulances, and then ended up in Cardiff Hospital with 2 stents fitted. And I've now got an ICD fitted in my chest here that is a defibrillator and a pacemaker. So if it happens again, I have my own inbuilt defib.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a bit of a shock.
And yeah, I can only imagine. And how's that changed your perspective on life?
Well, one of the things, it actually means that I don't get so stressed by the little things anymore.
Okay.
Today, somebody didn't turn up on time. Oh, well, it's not the end of the world if they didn't turn up on time. Yeah. I don't get stressed by the little things. Somebody cuts you up in a car. It doesn't matter. We're still here. Yeah. And I'm doing some volunteering for the organisations, the Wales Ambulance and stuff as well, to try and help them and talk about the importance of CPR and defibs and stuff. And I think what it's done for me, especially, I was talking to a widow of a veteran, and she said to me at the commemorative event that Rishi Sunak went to, she said, it happened to you for a purpose, and you came back because you had unfinished business. And this medal award is your unfinished business.
Brilliant.
And you take it like that. You go, okay, yeah, that's our unfinished business. So we carried on to get this to go. And we got the medal, and hopefully it's going to be awarded by the King in the next couple of months. And I think when that day happens, if we do get this award ceremony at Buckingham Palace and we see the veterans get their medal after such a long time, I think that'll be the big relief for me, and go, yeah, I did come back for a reason. I was gone. My heart stopped for 8 minutes. I was out. So
yeah, gosh. So
I'm very lucky to have those people there to give CPR and to give the defib on site. Yeah. So I didn't suffer any real major brain damage. So with lack of oxygen. So I'm one of the lucky ones. Only 1 in 10 people survive an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So it's, it's very lucky.
Oh, yes, amazing story. So what does the next 5 years hold? If we're sat here talking in 5 years' time, what does good look like for you? What constitutes success?
Well, our goal is to get it onto the curriculum for the education. That's our major goal over the next few years. We hope to also have a travelling exhibition where we will go to air shows, we will go to schools, we will go to colleges, and we will give talks on the subject. And we will, in the short term, while the guys are still around, they don't mind me talking like that. They are, they're in their 70s and 80s. They are still bringing them to show the next generation what happened is key for me. To see John Morris talk to children, which he does at the moment. He goes into schools at the moment to get that on a much bigger scale, so that when they're talking about history, they can actually listen to somebody that has seen, an atomic bomb set off. There isn't many of them left that have actually seen that mushroom cloud and actually seen it in person. And when you listen to them, they love it as well. They love talking about it. They love embracing this next generation of people that won't forget them. And that's what we want to do. We want to try and get that as much as possible. And the oral history project by the government means that people will be able to click on the site, on our website, might be from the British Library. We don't know which one it's going to be at yet. And they can listen to these people. The teachers can actually play their voices to the students. And people who are interested in it as well, the history people that are interested in it, the academics, the other people that are interested, not just the students, can also do that. They can listen to it. My son is 15. He never got to meet his grandfather because his grandfather died, fortunately, before he was born. So he's not got his voice. So if I can play him other voices of people who were there, then it's like my granddad was there at the same time. My granddad took part in that. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is build this awareness and education program. So if we can do that in the next 5 years and get it on the curriculum as part of history, as part of science, as part of politics, get it on there, geography, anything that we can do to make sure that when they're talking about the Cold War, that these guys are included.
And you mentioned that was difficult to, harder than you expected to get on the curriculum. So how are you going to unlock that, do you think?
We're working quite closely with the Welsh Education Board, and we are working closely with the Shadow Secretary for Education to try and get this as part of a curriculum change. So we are back into the political arena and back in to try and get to the top level with ministers to say this needs to be spoken about and this needs to be talked about and needs to be put on the curriculum. So that's a real target for us, is to get into there and get to meetings with them. And again, take them with us. Take John with us to meet the Education Secretary and sit down and go, listen to him. Yeah. Great. This needs to be included.
Good. Well, I wish you all the best success with that. Are you up for a couple of quick fire sort of questions?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So if you were to go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say, don't stress about the little things.
Yeah.
Don't stress about the little things. It can feel like the end of the world at certain times when you're a lot younger. Yeah. And it's not. It's not. When you have a health scare like I did, you realise that nothing's more important than your health, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Great advice. Any resources, whether that be books, podcasts, or anything else that you'd recommend to people that you found useful?
We've found quite a lot in our subject. If you talk about our subject, obviously we've got our website, LABRATS International. The academy is labratsacademy.online. But there's also a website that we've done called nuclearvoices.org.
Okay.
Which is a big, where the directory is of all the other frontline communities. And I would say that do your own research in this arena. If you're looking at nuclear weapons and testing, you'll soon realize that it's a massive subject.
Yeah.
We concentrate on the veterans and the nuclear testing side, but there's so much, politics, weapons development, getting rid of weapons. There's so much. Take your time with it and go through and listen to what the academics have to say, what the researchers have to say, and talk to us as well about it. I think if I would listen to my father about his time at the tests, he didn't talk about it a lot. And that's one thing I regret, is that he died in 1994. So I can't go back and talk to him.
Yeah.
So if you've got somebody on a subject like a father or grandfather, go and talk to them about it. Get them to tell their story.
Yeah.
Record it. There's so much easy ways of recording things these days. Phones, audio.
Yeah.
Get them on video. Get them on a chat. Get them before it's too late, before they're gone.
Yeah, brilliant. Great stuff. Any apps that you found you love? Anything you use, whether business or personal?
I tend to, obviously, apart from the normal sort of, normal businessy stuff, personally, I use Audible to listen to Audible books.
Yeah, great. Good.
And listen to podcasts and I'm a big Stephen King fan myself. So I tend to find it relaxes me a lot more to listen to these type of things rather than music. You get relaxed listening to a Stephen King story. Yeah. I tend to put it on in the car. If when I was doing longer journeys in the car, you get the same news every half an hour, so you put on an audiobook and listen to that instead. No,
it's been fascinating talking to you, Alan. Thank you for sharing your story and your insights into the nuclear testing side of things. If people, you've mentioned a couple of websites already, but if people would like to get hold of you or find out more, what is the best way for them to do that?
The best way is to go to our website, which is www.labrats.international, and all the links are on that website to our testimonies. We've got videos from around the world. We've also got a link to the directory at Nuclear Voices and a link to our academy, which is labratsacademy.online.
Great. Brilliant. Alan, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
Thank you very much for inviting us on. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.